Cave divers live by a few simple rules. Always carry a line to the exit. Never go deeper than your air allows, and never leave your partner behind. On November 23, 1983, two experienced divers entered an underwater cave in Texas and broke one of those rules. Only one of them came back. What happened inside that cave would later be described as a tragic accident. But many who heard the story called it something else. They called it betrayal. Viewer discretion is advised. The hills of central Texas are quiet and unremarkable. Dry grass, scattered trees, and limestone rock formations stretch for miles. But beneath this peaceful landscape lies a hidden world of underground rivers and flooded caves carved through the rock over thousands of years. Just outside the small town of Wimberley lies a natural spring called Jacob's Well. From the surface, it looks calm and inviting. Clear blue water fills a circular pool surrounded by stone ledges and trees. On a warm day, it looks like the perfect place to swim. But Jacob's Well is not a swimming hole. It is the entrance to a deep vertical cave system filled with narrow tunnels, sudden drops, and dead-end passages. Over the years, it had gained a reputation among divers as one of the most dangerous dive sites in the United States. Several divers had already died inside the cave system. Some bodies were recovered, others were never found. Because of these incidents, warning signs were placed around the well. Diving was strictly prohibited, but warning signs don't stop everyone, especially not experienced divers who believe they know what they're doing. Richard Patton was 22 years old and passionate about diving. He was a student in an advanced diving class at Southwest Texas State University. His instructors described him as intelligent, skilled, and calm underwater. He had training, experience, and confidence. Patton and his diving companion were considered some of the best students in their class. They understood cave diving risks. They knew about air management, navigation, and emergency procedures. But knowing the risks and avoiding them are two very different things. On the evening of November 23, 1983, the two students drove to Jacob's Well. They arrived around 8:30 p.m. as the sun was beginning to set. They prepared their scuba gear, turned on their lights, and entered the water. Then they began their descent into the dark opening below. Jacob's Well begins with a vertical shaft that drops straight down through limestone rock. As the divers descended, the light from the surface slowly faded above them. First, the water turned dark blue, then darker, then black. Soon, the only light came from their dive lamps, cutting through the darkness in narrow beams. The walls around them were smooth limestone, carved by water over thousands of years. The water was clear and still. The descent was calm and controlled. But they made a critical mistake early in the dive. They did not attach a guideline to the entrance. In cave diving, a guideline is essential. It is a thin rope that leads directly back to the exit. If visibility drops or a diver becomes disoriented, they can follow the line back to safety. Without a guideline, the cave becomes a maze where every tunnel looks the same. Divers can easily become lost, even if they are experienced. The two divers continued deeper into the cave system without a line. They were relying entirely on memory to find their way back. At about 90 feet below the surface, they reached a narrow passage that led deeper into the cave system. Years earlier, authorities had installed a metal grate over this passage. The grate had been placed there after rescue teams failed to recover the body of a diver who died beyond that point. The barrier was meant to stop divers from entering the most dangerous section of the cave. But when Patton and his companion reached the passage, the grate was gone. No one knows who removed it or how long it had been missing. But the passage that had once been blocked was now open. They looked at the opening. They knew it was dangerous. They knew it had been sealed for a reason. And then they made the decision to go through anyway. The passage was too narrow for them to swim through with their tanks on their backs. So they used a technique sometimes used by experienced cave divers. They removed their tanks and pushed them ahead while keeping the breathing regulators in their mouths. They pulled themselves forward slowly through the tight limestone tunnel. The rock walls pressed tightly around them. Their tanks scraped against the stone. Their movements were slow and controlled. Their lights created long shadows on the cave walls, making the tunnel look even narrower than it was. Breathing through a regulator is normally calm and steady, but in a tight cave passage, every breath sounds loud, every movement feels slow, every mistake feels permanent. They continued pushing forward through the narrow tunnel. Then suddenly, Patton's tank became stuck between the cave walls. They tried pulling it back. It didn't move. They tried pushing it forward. Still stuck. The tank was wedged tightly in the limestone, and they were deep inside a narrow underwater passage. They spent several minutes trying to free the tank, but it wouldn't budge. Their air supply was running low. Finally, they made another dangerous decision. They would abandon the stuck tank and share the air from the remaining tank. This meant buddy breathing, passing the regulator back and forth between them, one breath each, back and forth, over and over. It is extremely stressful and difficult to do while navigating through a cave. But they had no other choice. They turned around and began making their way back toward the entrance, sharing the single air supply. Without a guideline, navigation became extremely difficult. The cave passages looked similar in every direction. The darkness made it hard to judge distance and direction. While trying to find their way out, they made a fatal mistake. They turned into the wrong passage and began swimming upward into a vertical tunnel known as a blind chimney. It went up, which seemed like the right direction. So they continued climbing upward, sharing their last air supply. Their breathing became faster. Their movements became more desperate. When they reached the top of the chimney, they discovered the truth. There was no exit above them, only solid rock. They were trapped in a dead end with almost no air left. The air tank was nearly empty. Both men knew they were about to run out of air. In that moment, in complete darkness, one of them made a decision that would define the story forever. Patton's companion took the regulator and did not give it back. He turned and swam back down the chimney alone, leaving Patton behind in the darkness. It may sound like betrayal, but underwater, without air, survival instinct takes over. If both stayed, both would die. If one tried to escape, there was at least a chance someone could survive. He swam through the cave passages alone, nearly out of air, trying to remember the correct path back to the entrance. By some miracle, he found the right passage and reached the exit shaft. He surfaced at Jacob's well, gasping for air and shouting for help. But Richard Patton was still trapped inside the cave. Rescue divers arrived and entered the cave system to search for Patton. Navigating the same narrow passages and dangerous tunnels took time. By the time they reached the blind chimney, it was too late. Richard Patton had drowned in the cave. The next morning, recovery divers brought his body back to the surface. He was only 22 years old. Investigators later concluded that several factors led to the tragedy. They had not used a guideline. They pushed tanks through a narrow restriction. They had to share one air supply, and the missing safety grate allowed them into the most dangerous part of the cave. Jacob's well had already taken many lives before this incident, and it would take more in the years that followed. From the surface, it still looks peaceful and beautiful. Clear water, quiet rocks, a calm place in the Texas hills. But beneath that calm water is a maze of tunnels where one wrong turn can mean death. And somewhere inside that maze is a blind chimney where a young diver ran out of air in total darkness, while his partner swam toward the surface alone. Some people call it betrayal, others call it survival. But in underwater caves, there is one rule that matters more than all the others. Always find your way back.